You're watching Around the World, our top global stories. First up, global pharma giant Pfizer's CEO was cornered on the streets of Davos in Switzerland, where he was attending the World Economic Forum. He was badgered with dozens of questions by a reporter. Questions on the efficacy of Pfizer's COVID vaccine and why the company kept it a secret that it did not stop transmission of the coronavirus. And CEO Albert Bourla had no answers to any of those questions.
Did you know that the vaccines didn't stop transmission? How long did you know that without saying it publicly?
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Answer that question. I mean, we now know that the vaccines didn't stop transmission, but why did you keep it secret? You said it was 100% effective, then 90%, then 80%, then 70%. But we now know that the vaccines do not stop transmission. Why did you keep that secret?
Have a nice day.
I won't have a nice day until I know the answer. Why did you keep it a secret that your vaccine did not stop transmission?
Now that went viral on social media, raking in over 7 million views instantaneously. And India's Minister of State for Information and Technology, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, tweeted, and I quote, "Just to remind all Indians that Pfizer tried to bully the Indian government into accepting conditions of indemnity, as in not taking any responsibility for deaths resulting from the Pfizer vaccine." Away from that, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is expecting quote-unquote strong decisions as NATO members and Western allies meet to discuss the next stage of support for Ukraine in its war against Russia. Defense ministers from 50 countries, including the 30 NATO countries, are in this huddle. And the big question is, will they all agree on sending tanks to Ukraine?
One of the most important elements of Ukraine's victory is tanks, modern Western tanks, which we are negotiating with our partners to supply. And I thank everyone who has already made the appropriate decisions.
Zelensky also said that Ukraine is waiting for a decision from one European capital that will activate the prepared chains of cooperation on tanks. Germany has been facing mounting pressure to supply battle tanks to Ukraine. Zelensky has earlier vented out his frustration about not getting enough weaponry from the West. In the meanwhile, the UK announced last week that it will send Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine. And since then, Berlin has been faced with increasing calls to supply Leopard tanks, or at least clear the way for others like Poland to deliver German-made Leopard tanks from their own stock. It is Germany's new defense minister Boris Pistorius' first day in office, and he is not guaranteeing anything until after his meeting with America's Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Austin will be hosting this regular coordination meeting of Ukraine's Western allies at the United States' Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Even as the Pentagon announced another $2.5 billion aid package for Ukraine, and that includes Bradley fighting vehicles, air defense systems, and tens of thousands of rockets and artillery rounds. Russia has warned of an escalation in its attacks if the Western allies decide to give long-range weapons to Ukraine. America and the Western allies have so far sent only advanced and high-precision weaponry to Ukraine, while the debate on sending long-range weapons continues as we speak. And if they do decide to send tanks, then that would be the first time that happened since nearly the Second World War. Shifting focus to global tourism, which is not back to full capacity as yet, and the main reason for that are the missing Chinese travelers and a much hoped for boom in Chinese tourism due to the Chinese Lunar New Year festivities is now all set to be a damp squib. Chinese travelers are opting to stay inside China, that is, if they plan to go anywhere at all. In a bitter disappointment for the global tourism sector, pandemic fears have overshadowed holiday travel for China this year as well. And rightly so. COVID-19 is still a big risk factor. People are possibly not ready, or rather just getting ready. Many Chinese people lack passports as well. Flights are limited at the moment, and tour operators are still gearing up to handle group travel once again whenever that resumes. On the other hand, a few countries have adopted discriminatory entry policies against Chinese tourists. Now that further hurts the tourism sector and acts as a roadblock to recovery. China feels it's meaningless and not scientifically based. But even as some begin planning for longer route travels to Europe and Africa in the spring, it may yet take longer for foreign travel to resume to pre-COVID levels in China. Up next, Donald Trump, for whom things are not going well, setback after setback in his bid to become the American president again. In the latest, Trump and his lawyers have been ordered to pay $1 million to Hillary Clinton. A case they filed against Hillary has been dismissed as quote-unquote completely frivolous. Trump had sued Hillary, his 2016 presidency-run nemesis, claiming that she and the Democrats were trying to rig the election by falsely accusing him of having links with Russia. Trump filed the lawsuit against Hillary and the Democratic National Convention in the month of March last year, alleging that they conspired with the FBI. The case was dismissed in September last year, and in November, Trump coughed up tens of thousands of dollars in a settlement with one of the defendants in the case, who was demanding sanctions against Trump. And then the other remaining parties in the case, including Hillary Clinton, filed a separate suit demanding sanctions, for which this $1 million ruling has come. The court castigated Trump and his team of lawyers for abusing the legal system and went on to order a sort of a payback for Hillary. It's yet another loss for Trump, who is currently facing a barrage of criminal and civil cases, including the one about those confidential documents found at his Florida resort. This even as Trump's own lawyers are under the scanner for their own conduct in all those cases. Meanwhile, Trump, who used Facebook heavily during his 2016 presidency run, has now asked Meta to restore his account to help his rerun for presidency in 2024. He was banned from the platform 2 years ago after the US Capitol Hill riots. From North America to South America, where the protests in Peru are just not abating. They are getting worse, especially in capital city Lima, despite the declaration of an emergency there. In the latest, a huge fire broke out in central Lima. The large fire engulfed the San Martin Square in the center of the city and belched smoke into the night sky. Police in Peru released aerial footage of the fire and warned people against approaching the area. The fire broke out after a day of protests where thousands of people poured into the capital city. Many of them were from remote rural regions, and they were there for demonstrations against President Dina Boluarte and in support of her predecessor Pedro Castillo, whose ouster last month triggered the deadly unrest and cast the nation into political chaos. They gathered in Lima's historic downtown and clashed with security forces who barred them from reaching key government buildings and the business and residential hubs of the city. The police fired tear gas to try to subdue them. In the meanwhile, protesters also surrounded at least 2 regional airports as the turmoil in Peru continues with no end in sight. Moving on, a rehearsal on a movie set that went fatally wrong. Alec Baldwin fired a prop gun on the sets of a film called Rust, in which the cinematographer lost her life, and now Baldwin will be facing manslaughter charges. Prosecutors announced that the actor and the weapons specialist or armorer who arranges weapons for the film will be charged with involuntary manslaughter. Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer of the film, was killed when Baldwin fired that gun in 2021 on the film set erected in the state of New Mexico in the US. Baldwin was pointing a pistol at Hutchins when the gun went off. Involuntary manslaughter can involve a killing that happens while a person is doing something lawful but dangerous. The charge is a 4th-degree felony punishable by up to 18 months in jail and a $5,000 fine under New Mexico state laws. The court said that, and I quote, "An actor does not get a free pass." The court also said that celebrities like Baldwin should have ensured that their guns are checked in front of them. Specifying that there was a major lack of safety on the set, the court deemed that an accident does not mean it can't be criminal. Local authorities had flagged safety issues on the film set but left decisions about criminal charges to the prosecutors. Alec Baldwin, on the other hand, would really like to clear his name. He believes he has a good defense, relying upon the representation that the gun was unloaded. Baldwin had described the killing as a tragic accident. Lawyers for the weapons specialist said that she did not put a live round in the gun and believes it was sabotage. But no evidence has been found to support that theory. And finally, David Crosby, a rock and roll music legend, is no more. The mustachioed hippie superstar passed away at the age of 81. Crosby became a star in the mid-1960s with the seminal folk rock group The Byrds, known for hits like Turn, Turn, Turn and Mr. Tambourine Man. Crosby was among the first American stars to become close to the Beatles. While he only wrote a handful of widely known songs, the witty and opinionated Crosby was on the front lines of the cultural revolution of the 60s and 70s. He was a great advocate for peace, but Crosby's drug problems left him broke and alienated. The rock star had undergone a liver transplant in 1994 after decades of drug abuse. He survived diabetes, hepatitis C, and a heart surgery in his 70s. Crosby has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. Crosby sharing the stage with Stephen Stills, Graham Nash, and Neil Young at the Woodstock Festival are some of the images that will remain etched in rock music history. Rest in peace, you rock legend. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Around the World. We leave you with some of Crosby's eternal music. Thank you so much for watching.